In this episode, I sit down and talk to Kyle Domin, once again, a friend of the podcast and a SafetyPro Podcast Community member. He's a part of our team over there, posting good content and interacting with others. If you want to see the full video of our discussion, you can do so at the community site. The link is in the show note. You can sign up for free and watch these interviews that we post. There is premium content, and you do have to be a premium member to access that content, as well as comment, reply, and create your own posts. Otherwise, joining for free has a lot of benefits. We put a lot of content on the community site for free members, so feel free to head over there and enjoy all of that content. Also, head on over to Amazon.com. Link is also in the show notes. Grab your copy of Rethinking Safety Communications today and start improving how you communicate about safety within your organizations. So again, Amazon.com, the link is in the show notes. Rethinking Safety Communications. Let's jump right into our discussion with Kyle. Before we get into today's topic, I have one question for you. Are you still painting your floors for 5S markings, things like that? Don't do that. Head over to mightylinetape.com/podcast, a great partner in safety. They've been with us from the beginning. They have some really good products that are going to get you out of a whole lot of time, material, and maintenance and upkeep. Their floor marking tape is second to none. It takes up easily, doesn't leave a sticky residue. They've got floor tape with beveled edges for forklift traffic, carts, things like that. So it really holds up well to that kind of traffic in your facility. They also can do custom floor signs. If you have a particular logo or a message, they can make that happen. Get a free sample and try it for yourself. Again, head over to mightylinetape.com/podcast. Tell them that we sent you. You will get a free sample to try out in your facility today. Again, mightylinetape.com/podcast.
All right, we're here with Kyle Domin. What's going on, Kyle? It's been a minute or two since we've had a podcast episode. Actually, a couple of episodes ago, we did one.
Yeah, good to see you. Good to see you.
Yeah. I see you got your sprinkler pipe back there behind you.
Yeah, above head. Safety first, baby.
That's right. That would be weird if it were in the floor. Sprinkle like lawn sprinklers come up. Yeah. I don't know. That'd be kind of cool. I don't know about that. Put the couch over it.
Yeah.
So look, we're going to talk today in this episode about eyewash stuff. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. You've got a good one for us. So why don't you just introduce yourself for those who don't already know you out there in podcast land, and we'll start with that.
Yeah. My name is Kyle Domin. Been in various safety management leadership type roles for about 8 years now. And this been knowing this guy Blaine here for I think 5-6 years now. So
yeah. It's getting up there.
Yeah.
It's getting up there. And I just stopped off in Kentucky and saw you on my way back from Nashville a month or so ago or whatever. And we recorded a talk then. That was fun. So what is the deal? We were talking offline about this eyewash issue. So you've gotten questions about this. Is that what brought this up to you and we decided to talk about it?
Yeah. So there were some questions on, in LinkedIn and things like that were going around. And there's an individual who essentially was asking, hey, talking about the eyewash squeeze bottles. So the little small saline type bottles, few ounces. They were saying, hey, for a remote worker application, this may not seem adequate, in place of a fixed eyewash, which, they were like, what applications would you use it on? They're saying that they would need a larger bottle. And So real quickly is, having the definition first of why you even need the eye wash is, if it's an injurious corrosive, and that how OSHA defines it, you must have it something, immediately available to have access to the eye wash. And this could be found from the SDS of a chemical or, various means of, the pH, things like that. Those are all some different things that could make it an injurious corrosive. But so that was the question is, what would you use it for? And, that was one of the things that, my comment back was, hey, I've always understood it as you use that not in place of a fixed eye wash that runs the adequate amounts of time, the 15-minute flushes, things like that. But this is just something to use supplemental. It's on the way to the eye wash that's already in the right area. Maybe it helps you clear your eyes a little bit to see the eye wash better, something like that. And then like what, Blaine and I were talking about are just clearing some debris out of your eye, in the field, just some small debris that's not chemical related, So yeah, that was the kind of and my response was, hey, this is supplemental. And they have mobile eye washes that are
the big reservoirs.
Yeah, and the mobile eye washes, they have them even. They're like it looks like a beer water keg style that you can even attach it to a dolly and roll it out there with So they have them to where, and it's fully compliant. Hawes is one of the manufacturers. Guardian makes them too. So really, for a remote worker who needs access to the eye wash, to me, having just the bottles is not sufficient. We know that, but it's really, you could just purchase one of the mobile ones because they're not expensive at all.
No. And you can't plumb everything, even in a fixed facility.
Right.
It can be very difficult. And for various reasons. One, you change the layout of the building often, or the production line often, or you move processes to another line often, which means you move materials requiring the eye wash to a different location. You're right, and I will admit I blanked out and didn't listen for a little period of time after you said beer keg. So the key thing here when you said safety data sheet, OSHA has some definitions, and then of course the safety data sheet, and you hit on it. I think you captured it really well when you said, or whatever the chemical manufacturer requires. And here's the problem, because we understand this as safety professionals, because I talk about it all the time. We eat, sleep, drink, breathe this stuff, right? We know this subtle differences in language that is used. However, common vernacular out there conflates the what I would call eye rinse and eye wash. An eye wash, by definition, is, and that's what I would continue to use that term. But the average person, and not that we're above average, quite the opposite. Sometimes we're weird, right? The average worker, if you said eye rinse or eye wash, they're probably going to think that's the same thing. But that's essentially what we're talking about. We're talking about the difference between a quick rinse for some irritant. And an irritant may not trigger the need for an eye wash station. It's just, you get this in your eye, just rinse your eye, rinse it out, and so it doesn't trigger that other standard, right? And you get into the ANSI definition of eye wash. I think that's key, especially on a remote job site. You don't have any chemicals. I had this, and we had crews that were using materials at a job site, and they were like, we only have these bottles that we keep in the truck and in the trailer. Do we need the big reservoir? And I'm like, well, you would have to have a laborer, one worker, just moving that thing around, because as you're laying pipe, or as you're doing pipe fitting, or as you're you're using some of this stuff. So what does the SDS say? It just says rinse. If in case of eye contact, rinse. If irritation continues, go see a doctor. Okay, so it's an irritant. It doesn't trigger, doesn't mean we don't need anything. Yeah. But at least we get out of this whole, like, we got a compliance issue. At this point now, we're talking about a rinse and rinse bottles, and making sure that we have maybe a couple of states. It doesn't need to be within so many seconds of travel, unobstructed path, on the same level that you're using. So we get out of all that. That doesn't mean it's still perfect.
Right.
But that's what we're talking about. I rinse versus I wash. And so I always talk with fellow safety professionals about that distinction. But the trick is how to communicate the difference to our workers. And so that they understand, oh, this stuff I'm working with, it could bother my eyes. But by definition, there are always going to be exceptions based on our biology and how we react to things. But according to the standard, it is not, injurious, corrosive, and triggering this other standard. That's the trick. And that comes into with our training and education. Now we're going to drag another standard in, HAZCOM. The chemicals that I am going to be working with, they're exposed to, I need to be trained on either the chemicals, chemical specific, or chemical family, class of chemicals.
Right.
We just need to impart this knowledge on them that says, hey, this could irritate your eyes. Make sure you, good hygiene, take your gloves off before you wipe your eye or rub your face. And if it does get on you, just go grab one of these bottles and make sure you tell your supervisor, and we'll keep an eye on it. And, blah, 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 that whole thing is missing sometimes.
Right. Yeah. And you're keying in on it. It's like, is a little piece of debris in your eye that could become irritant, or is an irritant, immediately, or is it corrosive to the standpoint of when it immediately comes in contact with your eye, it's starting to cause something that could lead up to irreversible damage. So the difference is that it's the immediate impact, So those are the things that I agree, that we should be explaining to our workers is, how immediate are those? I mean, you get acid in your eye versus a small piece of debris. There's a big difference in impact,
Right. Yeah. And then, man, you're bringing up all kinds of, I'm having flashbacks. You talk about like contacts and. Yeah. If you're working with some of those things, and adequate eye protection, there's a difference between goggles and glasses, and even with dust, not just liquids, but I do, like, the average worker, I get it. But that's, again, we were talking offline before we started recording this episode. That's the value we need to bring as safety professionals to the organization. We need to be thinking ahead, and we need to be thinking about those potential issues. Those are error traps, by the way. Oh, you need safety glass, you need eye protection. We'll say eye protection. Well, that's eye protection is a big umbrella. Safety glasses is a particular kind of eye protection. Safety goggles is a particular kind of eye protection. Some are vented, some are for wet applications. Some, it's just, we have to kind of be the gatekeeper, if you will, because we can't expect all of our workers, they're capable of understanding this. It's not rocket science. It's not. That's not what I'm saying. But their mind, their cognitive load is focused on their craft. They just want to do a good job. And so we need to partner with them. We got to help figure some of this stuff, simplify all of this so that they understand when this is needed and when that is needed. And so I like that. That actually is a pretty good question. You said it was on LinkedIn. Yeah. And I think the confusion is rinse versus wash. And there might be an opportunity to, through education training with workers, to say, look, there's a difference. Rinse and wash, right? Rinsing, think about your hands. You rinse your hands versus washing your hands.
Yes.
It's a whole different, you know, do you rinse your plate or do you wash your plate after you eat at home, right? That's what we're talking about. A wash is a whole nother level for some serious stuff. And we'll identify those and mark those, and you'll get trained on those, and you'll know where that stuff is. Rinse is something not that. It's like
the opposite.
Yeah. And man, so communication, we can create problems with how we communicate things, and create confusion with our workers.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, didn't you just release a book about communication?
Oh man, you're gonna plug my book for me.
Yeah, I got you, man.
No, we didn't plan this, by the way. Yes, Rethinking Safety Communication. I think I talked about it was on the community site yesterday. Of course, depending upon when you're listening to this episode, yesterday could have been many days ago. I talked about how we can create confusion by, just through our communication, like how we communicate about this stuff. Inadvertently, not on purpose. It's just well-intentioned, but there's a balance too, right, Kyle? We don't want to be, I call it word nerds. If somebody says, if a manager or a leader says, safety is our number one priority, it's like we know what they mean, even though you and I as safety professionals would be like, well, it should be a core value. Priorities change. We're not going to raise our hand and interrupt that speech and correct that language, because the average person gets what they're saying. We have to look at intent. We have to look at like overall meaning and impact, and not kind of pick and choose the words. Okay, so that's one thing. But then amongst ourselves, we have to agree on like the terms we're going to use so that we don't create confusion out there. And that's tricky. It's a balance that we have, a tightrope we're walking.
Yeah. And then on the communication subject, I can't remember the stat specifically, but it was basically like that. And some people in leadership roles, they're spending 70, 80% of their time just communicating different levels of communication. So yeah, absolutely. all this stuff is, important for sure. But back to the eye washes, we were talking about, to your point, of being able to explain rinse versus wash, but then it's like, okay, is your wash acceptable to meet all the other, you're talking about being the gatekeeper and stuff like that. It doesn't meet all the other things that it's supposed to do. And then the other part of it, we were talking about, there's several different means for eye wash as far as mobile, the beer keg type platforms that I'm saying. I'm telling you, it's literally attached to a dolly that you can roll around. You could whip that thing around, and so there's several different variations out there, but it has a drench hose on it. And so bridging the gap, the next thing is to, a safety shower. So there's only one product that I've seen out there that is an actual mobile unit that could to provide enough gallon per minute flow per the ANSI standards that can flow enough. And this thing is massive. This thing is massive. And we were talking about feasibility of the purchase and things earlier. This thing is huge. And you would have to attach it to a trailer and pull it around and things like that. So, it would be a solution in a last ditch kind of, effort, but it's like, okay, well, what do you do? Because essentially ANSI says, that a drench hose, we were just talking about these little squeeze bottles being supplemental and in addition to the eye wash, but not a replacement. The drench hose is essentially the same thing. It's supplemental to the safety shower.
Right.
It's not a replacement for the safety shower. So there's not a lot of there's not a lot of products out there that are mobile units that can meet the 15-minute flush for a safety shower, because it's flowing a lot more than an eye wash does, for example. So
I was at a facility years ago,
mm-hmm.
and they had an acid etch line. So just imagine this linear process where operators would walk up and down this line that had a series of baths
mm-hmm.
that were stainless steel baths. And a part would get dipped into one and then come up, and then we'd be dipped in another and another, and all the way down to the end. Well, at the end was the plumbed eye wash and shower along the wall. So basically, the operator would be facing a bath,
mm-hmm.
and there would be another bath to the right. And depending upon how far they were in the process, there could be a bath to the left as well. And they were monitoring these parts getting dipped and everything. But behind them, about 5 feet, it was like a hall, almost like a hallway, but it was open area in a production area. Behind them was a wall, and along that wall there was a cabinet, and there was the first aid kit, and then eventually toward the end of the line, well within the distance they needed for the standard, there was this plumbed eye wash station. Everything's fine, perfect, right? Until the weekly PM from the maintenance team came along, and under the baths there were stainless steel doors, panels that would not fly open, that they would open up. They were on hinges, and then underneath there were valves, and there were some fittings they had to inspect. And they would, if someone was leaking, they would have to close the valve and then change the fitting, and so they would have stuff. Could get exposed even on their gloves and things like that. Well, when they brought the forklift in down that hall, you see where this is going.
Mm-hmm.
They would block. The only way in was from that end where the eye wash was, the plumbed eye wash and shower. They would block that access. So you had now a worker actually handling pipes that had residual from past leaks or whatever, touching this stuff. And now you've restricted. So they had to move the whole thing. I mean, that was the recommendation, was once a week. And if you think about it, with the PPE, and I think I talked about this on the coffee topic of how we can over-index one hazard when it's not likely to happen to that work group. But so we would tell the operators, this stuff is bad, this stuff is nasty, it's going to kill you if you get it on you, and which, we could create some sense of panic or anxiety among workers by sending the wrong message. But we also don't want to go the other way and go, nah, it's fine, you'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got the vapor hoods, ventilation, PPE, and we've got those controls. And yet we talk about the eye wash you're going to need, and they rarely need it, by the way. The operators rarely ever needed to use ever. They actually had no cases where somebody was exposed because it was a semi-automated process. They weren't touching the parts and physically dipping them. They were monitoring. But the maintenance workers, there were a number of cases where their skin started burning, or they touched themselves because they're actually getting hands-on. So they were over-indexing the wrong group with training and like warning, right? And so that was my recommendation. I said, you need to move that down, because now you're blocking it and they don't have access to it. It's like it's not even there. They cannot walk around this fork truck to get to. And sometimes it would be one worker takes the pallet of parts. It's not even a pallet. It was like a tote of parts, and would park the forklift there and get off and kind of walk around between the wall and the forklift, and then start working, getting the parts off. If they got exposed, there's no way, with stuff in their eye, burning, and in a panic, they would be tripping, and like they wouldn't even get to it. So it's stuff like that. It's like looking at your layout, looking at how the workflow takes place, and then looking at non-routine tasks. Like, well, that was once a week, so that was routine. That's what it got. That's how I got them. That was like, this is routine, because it's done once a week.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are all things definitely that you definitely have to consider that, especially in the layout of the facility. When even if the facility is, if it's a new build, wishful thinking, you can say, oh, okay, we can engineer and put these where they're supposed to go. But there's going to be a time where you're going to add another chemical, and it's figure out, okay, is this the right area to add this chemical? Is there other things that it could interact with, things like that? Eyewash layout, while we're staying on that, it's is it adequate? To your point, do I have to walk through a door to get to the eyewash? Do I have to walk through some stairs and go around the corner to get the eyewash? You get something in your eye.
Yeah,
it's hard. I mean, one of the examples you could ask somebody to do is say, okay, close your eyes and then walk to the eyewash. See how long it takes you. You know what I'm saying? And obviously, you don't want them to trip over something, things like that. But that's basically what it would be, because you get something like that in your eye, you can't see very well, so it needs to be. And that's why they have these, some of these requirements is for these reasons. So those are to Blaine's point there, the evaluation of the facility.
Man, that was the same employer. This is back when I was doing consulting years ago. That same employer had a lab right near that acid etch where they would test the parts and stuff. And they had chemicals that they were using in there that triggered an eye wash requirement. Well, they relied on the eye wash that was on that assembly line or that acid etch line. But this little lab had a door. And so there was a sign. Well, they were thinking, okay, flawed as it may be, there was a sign on the door. It had a window so you could look in the lab, see if somebody was working in the lab. And they had a hood, they had a fume hood, and they had some bottles and chemicals in there. The sign said, door must remain open when working. That was their fix, it was an administrative control. Well, the 3 times that I went through that area during the course of the week that I was doing this assessment at this company, there was somebody in there and the door was shut. And when asked, I'm like, I was just curious, the sign says, and they were like, yeah, but the noise, it's noisy. I sometimes I have to make a call to a lab or something like that. So I'll shut the door. And I'm like, okay, so this isn't practical. Yeah. So again, what the recommendation was, you got to put an eye wash and shower inside. And they actually found, I can't remember the product, but the wand, the hand wand, it met the standard for shower and eye wash.
Oh, the drench hose?
It had it was a hose with a handle, single, and that's the other thing. It has to be, you can't have to use 2 hands and tilt your head to the right and stick your tongue to the left and then use your left hand to pull. Like, you can't, it's got to be single hand use. You just grab it and the water comes out, but it met the standard. I can't remember the product because I saw the spec sheet on it. Yeah. I'll have to look that one up, but because they did.
Yeah. Because they used to, I'd be definitely, when you get to see that'd be good to know and see. But I know they used to allow the drench hose in place of way back when they used to allow that. So
this was years ago because I am an old fart.
Well, I'm not trying to age you, Blaine, but I think there was definitely. I think it was.
No, it was a while back. So
yeah, but I think because that was one of the communication pieces of the other safety professionals and stuff. It was like, well, we have a drench hose, so we're covered. And it was like, well, if you have to look into that more. It's like it's the same thing we were talking about. Which going back is it's supplemental. You can't use in place of, and And that's
Wait,
the other.
you mean the fire? You mean the fire hose on the spool?
Yeah.
Is not, that doesn't count?
Yeah. And your example there too, you were talking about, the administrative control and leaving the door open. And that brings up another thing. Are you creating another issue, with one of the things that you're solving? First off, to your point, you have to rely on someone to actually do that each time.
Right.
So, but the other part is, is that one of the, if you have chemicals in there and stuff like that, is that a room that the door is probably supposed to be closed? You talk about
control,
fire protection, things like that. Is that one of those things where, because with the doors open and it doesn't have one of those closures and you've got it wedged, and it's not going to be able to self-close or something like that in an event of a fire, So
I got to have a meeting with the leadership team at the end of the week. It was a gap assessment is what this was. And I used that as an example of bureaucratic safety, right? Top-down safety was you need to have by code, by regulation, whatever, you got to have access to this eye wash and shower. So we're gonna tell you keep the door open, and you can just walk right through it and get to that eye wash station. They didn't understand the work that needed to be done. If they would have just gone and done an observation, spent some time with the lab workers, they would have figured out all the phone calls that they're making and then the noise from that door. And like you said, quality control. We have to control access to some of these chemicals. We don't want people walking in here and getting this stuff. They would have understood this, but they didn't. They made an assumption that, they could just prop the door open. I mean, do as you're told, worker,
always ask the worker.
Lack of respect indirectly. They didn't mean that. It was a great leadership team, by the way, but they didn't realize how that played out to an outsider coming in like me. And they were like, oh crap, they didn't realize it. And that was a great opportunity to have them launch into a program that required. So what they did was, and I'd done this at another company as well. So they took their safety program, all the little different aspects of the safety program, right? Fall protection, whatever work group was impacted the most by that policy or procedure. They had to have one of them on the review team to review that program annually, to do inspections. So like the maintenance team owned the lockout tagout program, not the safety team. Safety team was there to support them to be like a subject matter expert. But when it came to executing and where to put the lock station and where, that was them. They are the ones that needed those things to be easy to get to, easy to do right, all that stuff. So chemical safety, they partnered with the lab workers. And from that point on, they kind of owned and helped contribute to improving the chemical safety plan that they had at that facility. Because before it was just, I'm just going to look at paper. I'm going to look at this manual that says thou shalt do this. And then we just throw a sign on the door and make them prop it open, and didn't understand the work they were doing. Yeah.
And that is, to me, that's like one of the, in my opinion, the definition of a sustainable culture. I'm kind of going to talk myself out of a job here, but when
don't we always work that in that direction though?
When you're developed, the team has developed to where they are owning these processes, like if it's safe work or lockout or whatever, and it's almost like it's fully sufficient. It's sustainable on its own.
Yeah.
They don't need you really anymore.
That is the direction you need to work in my opinion. I did it as a consultant.
Yes.
My job was to get the client to the point where they no longer needed me. And you have to be okay with that. You're always going to be needed.
Yeah.
But you have to work towards that, have that mindset, because otherwise you're going to be a bottleneck. You're going to be like the gatekeeper of information. They have to come to me for the answer. Not everybody can come to you. What if you go on vacation? What if there's only one of you? It's too hard to get a hold of you. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you have, I completely agree. And then you have, we're talking about these stakeholders, even though the safety professional is the expert, it's, if someone's on in line break or as their process, or someone's on in safe work, just the program, it's almost where I've seen it where safety professionals will be asking their input. It's almost like they when the culture is developed and sustained where they're owning that process, it's almost like you could even defer to that leader who has taken that, who's taken that on. And that's, to me, is huge in a culture. So absolutely.
And then somebody might ask, well, how are we then needed? Yeah. It's like, well, no, you have to sustain that.
Yeah.
We have the knowledge of the codes, the regulations, and the legal side, if you will, of OSHA. We have to document and capture all of this in our programs and manuals. We absolutely are going to be needed.
Yeah.
But I do believe the mindset we have to have is continuously pushing because the net benefit of that approach far outweighs any one individual's fear of not being seen as not needed anymore. You're always going to be needed because you got to sustain that over time. You're going to have a new manager, you're going to have a new supervisor. But yeah, I remember a compliance officer, and I became close with this individual. He later became an area director. He's retired now. He came out to a job site many, many years ago when I was working construction. And he wasn't there for our company. We happened to be there. And he was waiting outside the job trailer because they were like, well, the safety director's got to come out and meet with you. And so they called the safety director. And so I was like, hey, so I start like just talking the guy up. And we were talking, and I don't know how it came up. And we were dealing with excavations, for example. And I don't know how it came up, but he said, yeah, he goes, I'm just waiting on the safety manager. He's like, I just have a basic question, but I understand. I'm going to give him about an hour to get here. And I'm like, well, what question do you have? He's like, well, and this was back when they had a national emphasis program on trenching. Where if they see an open trench, they stop.
Right.
They just pull over, they stop, just to verify that the right protections are in place and being utilized or are available. They were digging, and they weren't at the depth yet, but the size of this job site and what they were doing, installing, they were going deep, right? They just hadn't hit it yet. Well, he didn't see any equipment or material out there. He didn't see any trench shielding boxes, nothing.
Right.
And he's the one that told me that he goes, yeah, everyone wants to send the seat. And this is a lesson for anybody listening that reinforces what Kyle just said about that sustainability piece and getting your leaders and your operators to the point that they're self-sufficient. He said, I don't care if the safety director knows all the safety rules. I want to talk to the worker that's exposed to the hazard. I expect them to be an expert in trench protection. And I said, yes, absolutely. Hallelujah. That right there, that maintenance worker needs to be the expert on lockout, tagout. Can you imagine a maintenance worker that works on a machine every week with preventative maintenance and repairs, and they have to stop and come and call the safety nerd? Now, wait, how do I lock this out again? That's that gatekeeper mentality. And it's usually driven by fear or control by an old crusty old safety cop that has to own this information. You make people come to you. They need to be the expert. My job is to make them the expert in what they need to know to do their job. They should be the expert. If I have a question about how to lock out a machine, I'm going to the maintenance manager or the maintenance worker. And that's where it clicked for me many moons ago, into 90s. Well, it may have been 2000. It was early 2000s. Yeah. It was like 23 years ago. 20 years. God, I'm old, dude. So, but I love that Kyle, that you're working towards that sustainability, that they need to know this stuff. like now, you know, and how to use this stuff. Do you find other safety professionals have to struggle with that?
Yeah. I think even when I've suggested or had this discussion similarly in the past, like sometimes the reaction is just like, they're like, what are you talking about? You know, it's like
right.
the one track mind and approach that, you know, you have to be, you know, weighed in on for every single decision. There's a difference between being reliant on somebody and then being
dependent,
collaborative, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And so,
absolutely.
So yeah, it's one of those things. It's, you know, that I've always constantly said is, you know, give the information, you know, you there's nothing, I mean, you don't gain anything from, you know, keeping it, you know?
Right.
And, so yeah, to answer your question, yeah, there's not many, out there when I've had the discussion, that, I mean, it clicks for them, I think eventually, but usually they're like, wait, what do you mean? And you have to kind of explain it from the, you know, from the approach. So, yeah.
Man, I did when I was consulting, I used to do a lot of work for a holding company, like a investment firm. They would buy up companies and turn them around and either keep them or, you know, get them profitable and sell them off to a bigger company. And everyone thinks that was a bad thing, but actually it was good because they injected a lot of capital and they invested in these companies. They wanted the company to improve. So they bought this manufacturing plant, this company, and they acquired it. And so that what they would do is they would say, Blaine, go in, tell us how bad it is. That is basically what it would be. And this safety manager at the time had a bad reputation. It was that what you were talking about. I am the authority. I will tell you when you're screwing up and you will know it, you know, that kind of thing. It got to the point where I would talk to operators and they would say, oh no, this guy never uses the front door to come into the building. So the manufacturing site had multiple buildings and it was a pretty big company, pretty big layout. He would never come in the front door. He would always sneak around. They would always say this to me. He'll sneak you. You got to keep your head on a swivel. And because he'll just appear like over there in the corner or behind a piece of equipment. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like he tries to catch people to write them up. That was it. That was his whole reputation. And I kid you not, Kyle, while I'm talking to this guy, out of the corner of my eye, I see this random side door that, like, it just said emergency exit only, kind of crack open and the sunlight came in. And I looked and I see this guy peeping and he shuts the door real quick. Yeah, that was him. And I'm like, what are you doing, dude? Yeah. This is terrible. Well, luckily for us, he wasn't this is going to be terrible for me to sound like this, but he wasn't a safety professional. He fell into the safety role because he didn't want to work the production floor anymore. And he did think that was the role, was the cop, the enforcer. These are the rules thou shalt obey, and there will be hell to pay if you don't. That was it. That was a terrible environment. Terrible.
Yeah.
And
you got binoculars. He's got the binoculars. It's like,
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Like,
that's right. Can you imagine doing that, going to work every day though, Kyle, and that's your job is to sneak around and come through side doors and peek to see if that operator's wearing their glasses, then jump out and go, ha ha, gotcha. You know,
like, what are we doing? Yeah, give me a break. Yeah, but there's still definitely some of those out there for sure.
Absolutely terrible. All right, man. Hey, this was a good discussion. I think we kind of covered the gamut, right, of kind of technical stuff, definitions of terms, and the I rinse versus I wash, and also we touched on just as, if not more important, as I like to say, technical knowledge is easy to come by. You can call somebody or you can just read something and get it for the most part. but it's that other stuff. It's that the leadership, it's the collaboration, it's this other stuff we kind of weaved in and out of our discussion. So I enjoyed our conversation here, man. What's on the horizon for you? What are you working on now, professionally speaking, for you as a safety pro? You doing anything exciting?
We're doing we had a coffee topic about it. We talked about forklift safety systems. So
boom lift, aerial lifts.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so both
you're
both
talking about the collision avoidance on the forklift.
So I was talking about the collision avoidance that we did a coffee topic about, but also
we talked about a lot of stuff, Kyle. So
yeah, we have. Hey, are you getting tired of me yet?
No, it's good stuff, man.
But the other one, the aerial lift, we did for example, recently we did the trainer, and our maintenance manager is basically owning the jail. He did the scissor lift, jail, or articulating, telehandler, and counterbalance forklift. So, collision avoidance, and then we have a big, just there's always something up. Alert Media, rolling that out.
Yeah, I worked with them years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Alert Media. Are you using? By the way, no affiliation with Alert Media, so yes. Save your comments that this is a paid. It's not. You're using them for emergency emergency alerts for emergencies and things.
Yeah, to just enhance, and we're see where we can integrate it, to our community alert system.
Now, I say that I wouldn't turn them down if they wanted to sponsor the podcast. Let's be clear, but they aren't at the time of this recording, nor am I talking with them. But that system was pretty cool. I like that. I like that system.
Yeah, so things like that. There's always something to do. They're for sure. Never.
Yeah, and you can watch. I know if you're listening on podcast land. To the audio, you can see the video interview at the SafetyPro Podcast Community site. It's free to join. You just sign up with your email, but that's it. We don't spam you or anything like that. There is a premium side where you can get access to premium videos and content and downloads and things like that we're continuing to work on. And we're going to do a panel discussion, Kyle, right? We're going to have like 4 of us talking about a topic. We're going to do the Brady Bunch Square thing with all of our faces on there.
It's a safety party.
It's a safety party. We threatened to do a bourbon tasting topic.
After hours coffee topic.
That's right. Coffee in quotations. So look, thanks again, and we'll continue our conversations in the SafetyPro Podcast community. And I have to give a shout out to one of our partners in safety, our friend, Drew Hinton at Aero Safety. Anybody that wants any kind of safety services, training, written program development, inspections, you name it, Aero Safety can meet those needs. And it's all customized to fit your company. It's nothing's off the shelf or canned like you will find at some other places.
Yeah, nothing's cookie cutter with
right.
With
and
Drew.
You've worked with Drew, right?
Yeah. Even before. So absolutely.
Yeah, nice. Great. All right. And Drew is always participating in the conversations. He's been on our podcast several times, and he's also been in our panel discussions on the community site. So go to aerosafetyus.com, mention that you heard about Aero Safety on the podcast, and you get a discount on your first quote. So Drew's going to hook you up for listening to the podcast. And Kyle, we'll talk again soon on the next episode at some point in the future. As always, thanks again.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
All right, there you have it. What do you think about this topic? Head on over to the SafetyPro Podcast community site. Remember, if you want to reply or comment on the interview, the video that we posted there of my discussion with Kyle, you do have to be a premium member. So drop your comments, your thoughts. Let us know if you've come across this issue of eyewash versus portable setup versus the little rinse bottles, combination of those. Share your experience with this topic so the rest of us can learn and grow. And I will talk to you on the next Safety Pro podcast.